What's going on, folks? Ted from Immersion here, and if you missed it earlier today, Game Informer, of all places, has a preview of the new D&D Player's Handbook. Not sure why Game Informer, of all places. Maybe it's because the stock for GameStop decided to go up again today. I don't know. But, yeah, I mean, could there have been a better avenue to announce this? There's not really a lot of gaming magazines left, if we're being honest. Dragon Plus would have, that would have been your obvious choice, but they shut down Dragon Plus. So I guess Game Informer may be the only gaming magazine still happening. I haven't really looked, to be honest. But either way, they have a preview of the new Player's Handbook and a lot of the art, which is pretty cool. And I see a lot of people talking about the art from the Game Informer article talking about the art. However, the latest issue of Game Informer, issue 366, actually has a ton of text and like interviews with the developers and stuff. So we're going to go ahead and look at the digital version of that as well. So let's jump over here. By the way, if you like what I do here, subscribe to the channel, YouTube stuff. All right, let's go ahead and take a look. Here it is. This is the thing that everybody saw, and it takes you to this article. First of all, this, I believe, is the new front cover, or one of the pieces of art that could be the new front cover of the Player's Handbook. I think it's fantastic. Looks great. Tyler Jacobson is doing the artwork. We have this piece of art here, which I really like. It looks like it's showcasing that same kind of artwork we saw from Dragons of Stormwreck Isle, which is essentially the D&D cartoon characters updated to be kind of real adventurers. You could see, again, Bobby, Presto, Hank, and so on here. But we can also see a bunch of enemies as well, possibly new artwork for some of those enemies. The goblins look relatively the same, a little more green. D&D goblins had that orange tinge for a while. We've got a mimic in a flower pot. They're touching this unicorn on the wall, right? Assume that's an homage to Uni, the unicorn that was part of the D&D crew. We've got an owl bear back here, some bats flying out. Looks maybe a pseudo dragon here, and like either some pixies or sprites. Very cool piece of artwork. It says, we had the good fortune to visit Wizards of the Coast a few weeks ago to learn more from the artists. The magazine article, which we'll read in a little bit. We were especially excited to real close look at the cover for the new Player's Handbook. Here it is. This is it. The world's greatest role. This right here is what you see is the brand new, officially revealed from Game Informer, what the front cover of the Player's Handbook. I'm liking this new kind of, I don't know, I want to say new style. I don't know if it is, but I don't know, I can't really put my finger on it. It's still got the same kind of text that we've seen, the 5e text that we've seen going on, but I don't know, it's more artistic. That doesn't make a lot of sense, but when I look at like the existing 5e Player's Handbook and the other 5e books, they're very like, I don't know, crisp. Does that make sense? I can't really put my finger on it, and I'm not an artist. I'm not well-versed in art. I'm a scientist, so I can't really explain it probably eloquently as other people can. But I really, really like the art. I like seeing the nice diversity of all these different characters. We're seeing characters actually casting spells, which is pretty cool. Where our cleric's got something going on over here. We've got, like, I'm assuming this is a paladin, and this might be a ranger, I think, and maybe a barbarian. We've got some kobolds on the front. We've got this red dragon down here, as well as this gold dragon. This new gold dragon art looks awesome. Very cat-like in the face, I'm noticing as well. Okay. The new Player's Handbook front cover embraces the game's revitalized approach to pushing forward legendary characters from across the history of the game. We like to see the likes of Yulan the Elven Queen, these are, okay, so that's who it's, Yulan the Elven Queen, Strongheart the Knight, Elkhorn the Dwarven Warrior, the Divine Mercian, and the Roguish Maliver. These are all, again, classic game characters. A lot of them appeared in Wild Beyond the Witchlight, I think. But wrapped around them is here's a zoomed out image. Benevolent Gold Dragon, a nod to the golden 50th anniversary of the game, and an enticing reminder that the dragons in the game's title can be allies as frequent as enemies. And then these kobolds look amazing. Look how, like, just, like, I don't know, severe and, like, angry, draconic, like, not like the typical, I feel like kobolds kind of have, like, a meek look to them, like the existing 5e ones. These look like, you want to mess with these guys. The new cover art comes from an experienced hand of freelance illustrator Tyler Jacobson. I've worked on D&D since 2009. And I did the covers back in 5th edition. I did the Player's Handbook, the Dungeon Master's Guide, as well as many of the covers that came after, like Storm King's Thunders and Vol's. Oh, interesting. He did the original Player's Handbook for 5e. Art style, just, they look drastically different. I'm loving the new style. Oh, and the direction for the cover art is highly intentional, meant to reflect the content inside. With the cover art, we wanted to represent each experience. Jacobson says, how do we make the Player's Handbook look like it's the player's experience, and how do we make the Dungeon Master Guide feel like the Dungeon Master's experience? So that makes sense. Here's another piece of art here. We have people riding on the back of a dragon. A lot of interesting designs in the characters. We got a tiefling here who looks like casting fly. We've got a very kind of runic-looking barbarian here. I'm guessing this is the rogue with like the map and stuff. I'm loving the characters look so different and interesting, and I like that, right? We're like, I mean, you probably as a D&D player, it's not new to you that every, different combination of ancestry mixed with class and all these different things can provide you a ton of versatility and options in the way your characters are represented and what they look like and all this other kind of stuff. And I think that that's phenomenal. And we're actually seeing that now. Like, if you go back and look at the 2014 Player's Handbook, there's some good art in there, but it's not very art heavy, I feel like. It is very text heavy, which is fine. You have occasional pieces of art. You basically get like the full page art for like each class. And they were very archetypical versions of those, like, again, race class combination. It's a little bit different now, and I kind of am liking, again, the diversity here. A separate piece of art on the reverse side of the Player's Handbook goes the other direction from the mythical heroes depicted on the front cover, depicting a party of unknown heroes and nodding to players who will craft their own legends. So that's what we're seeing here. Also, again, from sketch to art, not that this is something... apparently it's necessary now because of all of the call-outs of potential for AI art. We're actually seeing the genesis here from kind of line art concept to final version. Also interesting to see the change in the dragon's appearance. Very kind of chunky, more like draconic looking here in the original Gold Dragon to this much more like feline looking art that we see in the final product. Early book printings will bear a D&D 50th seal on the back, a recognition of the big 5-decade anniversary. As fans to come to expect, you can also look forward to alternative covers available in your local game store. Oh, this is going to be one of the first times we're going to get alt art for a core book, which is pretty cool. The new alternative Player's Handbook depicts a gorgeous scene of elves and a sinuous gold dragon, all printed in gold foil treatment. Oh, I'm excited for that too. Again, here showcasing, again, that original... dwarf art that sparked some of the AI discussion initially. A lot of our chapter openers are famous heroes. Almost every chapter opening features a different hero or group of heroes in a different setting. So you've got Dragonlance, Ravenloft, and so on. The cover is all about the villains and the sort of threats that the DM goes to, whereas the Dungeon Master Guide is all about villains. The cover is all about the villains and the sort of threats that the DM gets to play up. And in that art, you get to see a lot of our famous locations and some of our famous villains in its chapter openers. So it's sort of like the opposite side of the coin. It makes sense. I was especially struck by the mix of characters and settings on display in the revised books. Where many prior official books stuck primarily to the Forgotten Realms, chief home of Baldur's Gate, these new core rulebooks tend to embrace the multiversal nature of D&D. Again, we're kind of seeing that with Vecna Eve of Ruin, so makes sense for them to embrace this concept of the multiverse. I think like 10 years after 5th edition's launch, all these settings have come out. Spelljammer, Dragonlance, Planescape. That's probably why the difference are so much there. We want to show off all the different ways the players can play the game. Like, you can choose your type of character and a broad gamut for you to pick from. The art in the new core rulebook has a chief goal of helping to further an understanding of the game. Spells are often shown being cast. This is something we've heard about, and I definitely agree with. Art for the character backgrounds shows a possible place your hero could come from. It even extends to the visuals of creatures in the monster manual. There's a lot of mindfulness about the mixture to pick the monster design accurately for the stat block. If it's a creature that does slashing damage or something like you want to make sure we see claws, makes sense. And you want to make sure if the art has shows something like a stinger, there's nothing in the stat block. That makes sense, right? There's definitely been instances I feel like you could point out where there's like artwork showcasing a really cool like physical aspect of a monster, and then there's nothing tied to that in the stat block. As I had a chance to explore the completed pages during my visit to Wizards of the Coast, I was impressed by the bounty of art that fleshes out the books and how the art is represented to the act as a visual tool for organization. We worked with a design team to ensure that every class starts with the left-hand page, whereas before in 2014, it was just kind of a running journal. Oh, that's nice. So it's like little tiny things that work in your brain, like the class starts on the left-hand page as opposed to sometimes right, sometimes left. We wanted to do is every class would open with a full-page piece of art on the left-hand page with the similar data and stuff on the right page. So that every time you get to a new class, you get a sort of immediate visual, which we tried to theme around almost like an iconic version of what the class is. Here's the new Red Dragon art, which I absolutely adore. Love that. The revised book also gave the art and design team a chance to return to some of its most iconic visuals and refine the approach, including the titular dragons of the classic 5 metallic and 5 chromatic species. All the dragon stuff was really great, Herman says. We went through all 10 of them. We have new designs for all of these, and there will be a lot of that in the monster manual for sure. We're trying to update those designs to be something in which players could see the dragon's personality or what biome they live in or when they fit into Castle of All Dragons. Here's the new bronze dragon design, drastically different than the existing one. Loving the tail changes. Also, by the way, I'm going to beseech you, even though it's way too late in the process, Watsy, just give us a good dragon with poison breath. We don't need like 3 dragons with fire breath, right? You have good and bad with lightning, good and bad with cold, good and bad with ice. I'm sorry, I said cold already. Lightning, fire, ice, acid, and then you just give us another fire dragon on the good side, whereas you should just give us poison, make it equal, but whatever. As a longtime D&D player, I came away from perusing these new versions of D&D with a lot of excitement. The art we're sharing publicly is just a sampling of what we have the opportunity to look over. There's a cohesive visual language to the new books that is enticing, and I love the way the game seems to embrace the long history of heroes, villains, and iconic named monsters. Don't miss our in-depth tour. We're going to check that out in a second here. So here is some more of the artwork. Can we get this up to full size? No? There we go. There's the front cover. Again, here it is with the full piece of art. This is supposed to be just inside the front cover. Here's that art of the D&D cartoon characters. We have, this is, I think, the iconic, this is the wizard. When you flip to the wizard page, this is like the main wizard artwork. And I think this is the fighter. I also am wondering, I saw some people talking about it, could this be Tordek from back in the 3.5 days? Would be pretty cool if that was the case. Looks like a gnome, maybe sorcerer? I don't know. Illusion magic? And this has got to be Warlock, right? Right, with the patron in the background. What a beautiful, sexy piece of art that is. And then we've got some, I'm not exactly sure, some artwork of a city. They've got, oh, this might be background artwork, right? Here's like a rolling hills. We've got sort of like a mage's. Oh, look, does this tiefling have hooves? Could be canonical tiefling hooves. We've got like familiars and things, maybe some sort of wizard study. Here's some sort of like high aristocratic household looks like. And then this big Colosseum with the big, either, I guess this is a silver dragon, right? We've got, oh, there's a Harengon right here in the artwork. Never noticed that before. We've got a tiefling up here. We're seeing a lot more. Oh, look, here's like a kobold on this guy's shoulders. A lot of diversity in the, I guess, again, we're using 5e terminology, species that you see around. And then again, here is the 2 dragons. Here's the sort of concept to final version of the front cover. And then again of the fighter. Oh, and this is new. This is a different perspective, or I guess this is the genesis that led to that silver dragon artwork. So again, look at the changes in how the dragon was depicted before it ended up in the final version. All right, let's dive in to the actual article itself. The future of Dungeons and Dragons. The makers of D&D have a secret door that obscures a hidden room. Explore the corridors of their new headquarters. Again, reminder, WotC did get a new headquarters. We know that. An unassuming rulebook on a shelf can be manipulated to reveal the covert entrance. Inside the hidden chamber houses treasures, walls of detailed miniatures, mounted dragon heads, and luxurious seating around a grand table suitable for playing out similarly grand adventures. Wizards of the Coast has been preparing a revision and update to the to D&D for years, fully compatible with the popular 5th edition of the game. It's captivated tabletop players for the last decade. After a day of exploring the ins and outs of the newly revised books and speaking with the developers, I have the answer. Like the hidden room in their offices, this new version of the game may not be yet complete. But once you have a good look, it leaves little doubt about the treasures that wait inside. Changing times. All right, let's see what this says. It's been a tumultuous period for the D&D brand. Wizards of the Coast has weathered some high-profile challenges in recent months, including disagreements with fans and other publishers over licensing issues, print problems around a big release, and most recently, the departure of division president Cynthia Williams. At the same time, D&D continues to enjoy, at least Game Informer addressed at least to a very small extent, but they did address, that it's not been all sunshine and roses for WotC. At the same time, it continues to enjoy unprecedented popularity. The 2023 movie was received well by critics and fans. The online streaming movement around the game continues unabated with the recent release of Baldur's Gate 3. In the wake of the tumult, the D&D design team the team working on D&D has continued quietly sculpting the next evolution of the game. After decades of new, quote, additions that fundamentally rework the way the game is played, virtually everyone with any connection with D&D seems to recognize the current 5th edition released in 2014. Nonetheless, 10 years of design advancement, experimentation, and feedback have brought to light countless opportunities to enrich, improve, and advance the game. It's really about just taking stock of all the lessons we've learned over the past decade, all the conversations we've had with each other, with our fans, said Chris Perkins, and getting these books to be the best first entry into the game as possible. Before visiting WotC, I incorrectly surmised that plans for a game revision might be mostly surface level or about repackaging existing content. After a day of looking over the books, talking to the artists and designers, and learning about the content plan for each new core rulebook, it's clear that the books are far more than new window dressing. After playing D&D for nearly 40 years, these new books represent the version of the game I strongly suspect I'll want to play at my table. So I want to take a minute to talk about that. So you could see the confusion, right? Is this just repackaging or reprinting and new window dressing? Because we're still calling it 5th edition, even though it's a total revision. We're not changing the edition name. And the writer here from Game Informer is basically saying, I thought they were just going to be repurposing content for the purposes of launching something new and potentially just cashing in again 10 years later. And then going to say, no, it's not. It's basically, it is a big revamp to it, which, again, I'm paraphrasing what they're saying, so take this with a grain of salt. This is my opinion on it. But they're basically saying, like, it's not just a couple of minute changes and a chance to repackage and resell existing content. It's a full rework of this edition, or at least a full, significant changes. Although supposed to be backwards compatible, it's basically a new edition, but without being called a new edition. And I'm wondering if they're going to just stop at 5 and we don't ever get a new edition. They're just going to keep iterating on it or revising it or however they want to do it. It sounds to me like WotC feels like they've gotten pretty much, they were like most of the way where they wanted to be in 2014, and now they're revising they're at their final iteration or a near final iteration with these 2024 rules revisions. And I wonder if they'd be comfortable never doing another edition. I don't know. And I mean, obviously future people who might own the product, or, if sales tank at some point or popularity wanes, then they might bring back a 6th edition or something like that to try to revitalize the brand. And that's kind of been what's happened, right? We had 3rd edition. We changed stuff up to make it more MMO friendly around the launch of 4th edition, fitted with that, launch it with Neverwinter, which is still to this day an MMO. And then when sales started to kind of tank, revitalize it and make a 5th edition, and then bring in a whole new slew of fans. And then obviously 5e went ways that I'm sure WotC could never have imagined with the popularity that it's gained. But either way, I wonder, could we be done with editions entirely? Who knows? All right, new approaches. Perhaps it's a presumptuous statement, especially when I've seen only snippets of the final game. I'm not prejudging. There's no doubt that much remains undetailed about this new version of D&D, but I'm eager to put the final version through its paces, but my sunny prediction isn't without evidence. This is the first time in D&D's history that the lead designers of one set of the core rulebooks are the same leads going into the next round of core rulebooks, says game designer Jeremy Crawford. That's also true. Consider that. Although this time we have a new friend joining us because Chris Perkins, James Wyatt, and I are the leads on the 3 core rulebooks decades ago. This time it's the 3 of us joined by Wes Snyder. Because we are getting to revisit our own work, we're able to flesh things out in a way that I think has never been possible before, Crawford continues. Because we look at what we did a decade ago, and I know exactly why we did it, and I know what is really at the heart of it, and we know how to preserve that heart, but it also means we know which parts are changeable. So I guess let me ask you guys that. Is that a good thing, right? That it's the same design team from 10 years ago designing the core edition or updating this edition again? Because obviously with new blood coming in and new people running stuff, you're going to get new opinions and potentially even better options in the long run. But also, if you get the same people, could they be too stuck in their ways on something and not want to change it? Who knows? The D&D design team seems not just accepting, but enthusiastic about players continuing to refer to the breadth of 5th edition books released over time. The value proposition of the revised core rulebooks is about the wealth of added content, better organized presentation, reworks of systems like classes and backgrounds, the introductions of player bastions and weapon masteries, a bevy of new monsters and spells, and the bounty of fleshed-out fiction for the D&D multiverse. It's also the art-forward and visual stunning approach that brings the new books to life. Each of the 3 books, Player's Handbooks, DMG, and Monster Manual, number 384 pages, and the amount of included art to ignite one's imagination is impressive. We'll talk a little bit about the art here. From its inception, D&D has relied on art to bring its fantastical settings to life and give players and dungeon masters fertile ground to grow their own stories. There is a sumptuousness to the new books that is really thrilling. People really are going to simply get to see aspects of D&D they'd never seen before. With the revised edition, or releases rather, from covers to stunning interior art, the goal has never been more apparent. There's a stated intent to help D&D players contextualize and understand the content they're reading and bring the manifold worlds of D&D to the forefront. And that makes sense. They've been very open and honest that there's a ton of art in these books, more so than ever before. And again, that's basically what it says here, right? Newcomers might not recognize Raceland and Karama Marger battling against a wyvern, or Bobby the Barbarian from the old Saturday morning cartoon, now all grown up, towering over his friends as they explore an ancient ruin. Yeah, so that's what we're talking about. We're seeing kind of, again, nods to classical art and things. Even if we don't recognize those names, this new revision revels in the history and mythology of the game, helping the books feel rooted in legends that have been discussed and debated around gaming tables for decades. Every chapter opening the player's handbook depicts mythical figures from across the fiction. At the same time, other pieces of art guide your imagination to new places and criteria. The sprawling class chapters of the player's handbook features over 60 illustrations, including one big page-filling iconic representation of each of the 12 core classes and 48 additional pieces for 4 subclasses under each. And hopefully, as players go through this, they'll see a ton of characters, and hopefully it's going through 60 of them. They'll see one or even a handful they're interested in, and they might even want to play. That's true too, right? Sometimes you might not be necessarily interested in the mechanics, but you see an image and then like maybe it just clicks to you. Oh, that's what it's supposed to be like, or that's how it could be. And then it just interests you in something that you maybe weren't interested in before. In the background section, each environment art evokes a sense of the place your character's history. We wanted the background art to literally be a background you could imagine your character from. For each species, we see groups from each category emphasizing the culture of the people. Individual weapons are pictured as you peruse equipment. No more wondering about the difference between a glaive and a halberd. Wonderful. That's something we saw in older editions where they depict each weapon. Nice to see that. Spells are frequently illustrated in the midst of being cast. Monsters are seen deploying attacks they're known for. Everything is presented to increase immersion and ease understanding. Good. For the players, the new player's handbook is strongly rooted in usability. Eschewing earlier versions that launched directly into character creation, the robust opening chapters all about playing the game, filled with examples and footnotes explaining what is happening. Book references are included in a rules glossary with quick explanations of rules around cover, jumping, being prone. Fantastic quality of life stuff here. The shared goal is to welcome new players with approachable introductions and offer instant access and explanations to experienced players. The subsequent dive into character creation takes up a big part of the book, but based on what I saw, it's simultaneously easier than ever to craft something quickly while still giving flexibility to those who prefer to manage each facet of the character's build. For instance, a table offers a full ability or score array for every class in the game for players who want to move past and confidently lock in good choices, but there's also the option to tweak and roll as desired. All 12 core classes are returned. Nothing crazy there. Let's see. The designers are especially proud that they've managed to reach high approval feedback. Yeah, this is an Unearthed Arcana process. Backgrounds offer ability score increases and a starting feat. Again, this is kind of the change we've seen. These origin feats are part of the 75 feats featured in the book, so that's nice to see. 75 different feats are going to be in there. And again, Wizards of the Coast is tying the ability score improvements to the backgrounds, not to your species. So it's not like an inherent thing. Although I'm surprised they're honestly including ability scores tied to anything. like, why is it not just pick +2 to one, +1 to another, or +1 to 3? That's just like built-in core part of your character building process. It's actually one of the things I really like about Tales of the Valiant. The genesis we've seen of things going in 5e kind of away from hard and fast, like dwarves get +2 constitution, +1 strength, to you just choose what you want when you would choose the race as it was now. Now they're tying like a hard number to the background. Seems kind of odd to me. Just make it just a choice. It's just a facet. You figure out your ability scores, add 2 to one, or 1 to another, or +1 to 3. Just kind of made more sense to me. But either way, 75 feats is good to see. 16 backgrounds like Hermit, Merchant, Noble, and Sage. Species have been revised to bring new life, including the long-term uses of the word race. For years, when D&D used the word race, it meant race as in term of the human race. And I found that given the number of times we're explaining that, we thought we could how we change the word, make it just what it means, which means species. Classic options like human and elves, which incidentally are by far the most popular selections by players, are joined by new included options like the plain-touched Azamar, the hulking Goliath, and the mighty orcs. Azamar was not referenced as being a a species option in the player's handbook, so that is kind of a surprise. So we are seeing Azamar make their way into the full-blown... we had Tiefling and stuff, so it kind of makes sense if, for us older fans who were like Tiefling and Azamar are one side of the different kind, the Infernal versus the Celestial side, makes sense to include them, so they'll be in the base handbook, along with the Goliaths as well, and Orcs. Equipment uses sees one of the most notable new additions, Weapon Mastery. Talked about that. We don't really need to go over that too much here. In addition, the newly expanded equipment section includes features new tools section with specific actions connected to each, and newly expanded item crafting section, which includes rules for spell scrolls and potions of healing. Wow, are we actually getting things that we've wanted? This is kind of crazy. They don't mention anything about new types of weapons, just new weapon masteries, but I do believe we might be seeing some new weapon types, possibly new armors as well. Nice to see that tools have actually, they were kind of almost felt like an afterthought. In some instances, I'm sure you've seen this in your game, like, oh, I took calligraphy supplies, what do I do with that? But now you might have an action for it, and then possibly actual good rules for crafting spells and healing potions. Good to see. The spells chapter houses an overwhelming array of magical options, including returning spells from the 2014 options, culled from other books in the last 10 years, and the new spells like Tasha's Bubbling Cauldron. Finally, one of the features I'm most excited about is an expanded appendix introducing the D&D multiverse to players. Prior core D&D releases would often stop short of often detailing other myriad campaign settings, focusing on the Forgotten Realms. The revised books are explicit in embracing the vastness of D&D worlds, including Kryn, Eberron, Spelljammer, Planescape, Greyhawk, while also openly touting that every gaming table can work with whatever they wish. When anybody asks Jeremy or me what the core setting of D&D is, we tell them it's the multiverse, Perkins says. And that surprises a lot of people. They think we should default to some particular world, but we recognize that not only does the multiverse include all the settings we've created, but includes everybody's homebrew world as well. These revisions are a chance for us to double down on that. It's a refreshing way to approach the fiction, suggesting Wizards of the Coast isn't shying away from the breadth and richness of 5 decades of settings. And that is nice to see. But, it was the Forgotten Realms, let's be real. That was always the core setting. All right, let's see. Every subclass gets depicted illustrations. Oh, that's the wild magic sorcerer that we saw. That's a wild magic halfling sorcerer, not gnome. So that's the subclass art, which is awesome because it is a full piece of art, which is really cool. During my visit, I saw fewer finished pages from the DMG and the Monster Manual. There was still plenty to discover, scheduled to release in the months following the player's handbook. The designer stated a clear objective for the DMG to make it as indispensable resource inside and outside of play. For years, it's been valuable for its treasure trove of magic items, and that's basically been it. I would agree with that. The new version aims higher. We always talked about wanting the DMG to show, not tell, Perkins says. So it's not enough to simply tell you how to make an adventure. We're going to show you how to make some adventures written in a way that a DM will want to emulate for their own campaign. Sample adventures are roughly half a page, represented as springboards for DMs to flesh out alongside specific advice for efficient session prep. Much of the book is structured around these types of concrete tools, resources, and guidance. Numerous sample maps are included, waiting to be filled with traps and monsters. What do you use a DM screen for? How do you design an encounter? Guidelines provide a framework for buying and making magic items. So we might have legitimate prices for magic items and making maybe actual crafting. One of the conspicuous additions is the Bastion system. We saw this in one of the Unearthed Arcanas. Experienced DMs have experimented with the idea of headquarters for the players. Bastions are optional, Crawford says, but in any campaign where bastions are used, they give players something back at home they care about. Because not only is it a place, but there's also people who work in the bastion, and the player will get to decide who those people are. Different PCs might build shrines, theaters, wizards' towers, secluded nature groves, etc. Characters can complete bastion turns between adventures, which can play out both at the table or far away from it. It's player controlled rather than being dictated by the DM, and lets everyone at the table introduce new role-playing elements through intrigue, romance, friendship, mentoring, and more. Furthering the focus of the D&D multiverse, the DMG includes a full lore glossary helping to shed light on many names and places peppered into the game over decades. If you wanted to know who Venger is, what makes the city of Baldur's Gate so special, or the covert nature of the Harpers, it's a good bit of in the lore glossary will help you out there. It's cool. Even as the multiverse of D&D worlds sees its increased attention, the DMG also offers a discrete setting to get gaming groups started. After very few official releases in the last couple of decades, the world of Greyhawk takes center stage. The book fleshes out Greyhawk to illustrate how to create campaign settings for your own. Greyhawk was the original D&D setting, world crafted by D&D co-creator Gary Gygax, and a worthy setting to revisit on occasion of D&D's golden anniversary. It's worth bristling with classic sword and sorcery concepts, from an intrigue-laden central city to wide tracts of uncharted wilderness. Compared to many D&D campaign settings, it's smaller and less fleshed out, and that's sort of the point. It begs for DMs to make it their own. The book offers ample info to bring Greyhawk to life, but leaves much undetailed. For those eager to take the plunge, an included poster map of the Greyhawk setting sets the tone, and its reverse reveals a map of the city of the same name. A big draw to Greyhawk is its original, the origin place for such heroes as Mordenkainen and Tasha and others, Perkins says. There's this idea that the players in your campaign can be the next great world-hopping spellcrafting heroes of D&D. It is a campaign where heroes are born. So that's cool. We heard they were going to detail a campaign setting to teach us how to write one, and it's cool that the one that they're detailing is Greyhawk. And then lastly, we have monstrous options. The Monster Manual is the biggest Wizards of the Coast has ever released, featuring over 500 monsters, 75 of them brand new to the game. Among the monsters that have returned, no creature's stat block remains untouched in this revision. In every case, the benefit of countless play sessions and campaigns is leveraged to rebalance and enrich, with the hope that encounters become more nuanced and exciting. The challenge rating governing each monster's difficulty remains the same, maintaining the commitment to backwards compatibility. However, the new versions here often have distinctive features or greater opportunity for variability. Many monsters now have expanded families of connected monsters, building an ecosystem of linked and themed types. A great example is vampires, Crawford says. We've realized as popular as vampires are, it's actually hard to encounter them earlier in your adventure because they'll wreck you. But on the other side, if you get to really high level, vampires kind of go out of style power-wise because it eventually gets to a point where you can just steamroll them. So what we've done is created a new lower challenge rating vampire, a person who is in the process of becoming a vampire. And we've also added a much higher challenge rating vampire called a Nightbringer, who is more powerful than the stock vampire we had previously. And so now you have not only bigger challenge rating for encountering vampires, but also clearer narrative about the vampires. And that's something they mentioned as well, right? We're going to have low, like kind of monsters through the CRs so that you can use a version of them at various points so that you're not going to be like locked out of using vampires until later in the game, or, you know, only have the option to use orcs at like level 1. One of my favorite additions to the Monster Manual is an invigorated approach to epic Titan-type encounters, the apex of the monster food chain. One of our goals was to create a set of monsters that would feel like Pierce to the Tarrasque and the Ancient Dragon. For instance, the Blob of Annihilation is so big, imagine a gelatinous cube that it could absorb entire towns. If you see the Abomination coming, it's a catastrophe. Other examples include the Elemental Juggernaut, Colossus, constructs that can crush buildings with a single step, or startlingly dangerous high fae like the Archhag. These are devastating encounters that player groups laugh and muse about meeting as they commiserate around the table. Rounding things out, on the focus of the NPCs in the 2024 Monster Manual has been greatly expanded to offer entire varied groups within a given theme, like bandits, pirates, and entertainers, mages. Each provides for ease of dropping into play without need for prep and at various levels of power to match the needs of the game. As D&D turns 50 years old, its impact on the video and tabletop gaming world is undeniable. After a decade that saw tremendous growth for the brand and the role-playing hobby as a whole, a new revision of the game releases into a far more competitive and complex landscape for the tabletop role-playing scene. We still have months before all 3 books are in our hands and the next phase of D&D's long history begins in earnest. In advance of that, it's clear that the team crafting this next iteration of the game is ready to defend its long legacy, not through reinvention, but through measured, thoughtful expansion and revision. alongside a drive to perfect a system that has shaped and informed the entire gaming landscape for decades. There you go, folks. That is the entirety of the Game Informer article, art and all, from the new, basically, updates saying the 2024 Player's Handbook. A little bit about the Monster Manual and DMG in there as well. Let me know your thoughts and opinions on this. I think a lot of us are pretty excited about it. Obviously, there's a lot that's happened. I'm going to be covering all this stuff as it comes out as best I can. And I'm very curious about this, right? It's just, I can't seem to really fully wrap my head around this concept of, it's essentially, we're talking about all the changes, systematic changes all over the place that are going to make it almost like a brand new edition, but we don't want to call it a new edition. And it seems like, to me, the main reason Wizards of the Coast doesn't want to do that is 5th edition has power. That name means something. A lot of people know what 5e is. And if you change it to 6th edition or 5.5 or whatever you want to call it, 5e revised or 5R or whatever it is, you might lose that instant recognition of 5e. So they kept it 5e and then just changed some of the stuff on the back end. Now, don't get me wrong. A lot of us that have been playing D&D for especially 5e for like 10 years, we've probably all kind of migrated to our own homebrew version of a 5e revised, right? Many of us for many years have been doing things like giving you a feat at first level. That's now a base core mechanic of this updated revised version of 5e. Backgrounds give you a feat. A lot of people were just doing that anyway. But that also means that the kind of cool, nuancy background features, which were kind of not necessarily a feat and were very specific and sometimes almost unusable depending on what you were playing, like the concept of an acolyte being able to stay for free at a church, right? Maybe that should just be a thing that's allowed, but that was like a quantifiable background feature. Probably, again, I've used it before. The Outlander's background of like being able to find food for themselves and up to 5 other creatures as long as they're in natural terrain that would be able to provide them food. That's a thing that they could do inherently because of their background feature. That background feature is now gone in favor of you being able to take a feat. Now, maybe there's a feat that gives you the same benefit of that in something else, so it's almost not needed. We don't know there's 75 feats. I know for a fact there was not 75 feats in the player's handbook. I'd have to look, but I don't think it numbers at 75. I think it's more like, I mean, maybe if you're counting things like multiple versions like Elemental Adept Fire, Elemental Adept Acid, stuff like that, maybe that would be, multiple different options. But 75 is a large number, so we're going to see a decent amount of improvement. Maybe this is amalgamating a bunch of the feats from other books like Xanathar's Guide or Tasha's Cauldron. Maybe those are all getting kind of brought into this. Any of the existing, which ones were racial feats, maybe they'll still have like special feats. I don't know if that'll be a thing. Or again, like I said, maybe some of those background features have been reworked into a feat, right? Like it felt like the chef feat from Tasha's Cauldron, I think it was in, or maybe it was in Xanathar's. I don't remember. It felt like it could have been a background feature. Like it's useful, it's good stuff, and it felt like it could have been a background feature. So maybe if like chef is a background, that's the feat that you get for it. Does that make sense? So notice it did say 12 classes. They were not going to sneak in the artificer in here. Unfortunately, it's not going to be in it. But we did see some new species arrive, like the Azamar. Again, more feats, new options for crafting and stuff. So I'm excited to see what it's ultimately going to look like. But, I'm also still a little skeptical about this concept of keeping it like, how backwards compatible is it really? Because if it's fundamentally shifting to the point where people are basically calling it out as it is a brand new edition, but it's backwards compatible, but kind of like, I think the concept of the backwards compatibility is largely based on the adventures that have been written. I mean, I know they say it will work with classes, and we might look into that once we have it in hand. But for example, we know like the clerics had like 8 subclasses in the 2014 Player's Handbook. There's only 4 in this one. How directly backwards compatible are they? They said there's going to be a rules glossary. Is that rules glossary? I believe in some of the early conversations, they said it would give you the tools you needed about what you would need to do if you wanted to play with a 2014 version of a subclass at a 2024 rules book table. there would be some sort of like transcription guide that would tell you these are the things you have to do. The largest one being that you start with a feat at first level because the backgrounds would give you a feat. So let's say I want to play with the 2024 version of the Paladin. You want to play with the 2014 version because, smites are better or whatever. In theory, we're supposed to be able to play at the same table. Might be a little confusing for the DM, but we might have to tweak your class a little bit or, to balance out the power, as it were. So I'm very curious to see how truly backwards compatible it is. They noticed that they didn't change the challenge rating of any of the monsters that they did. They just tweaked them to either be more, and honestly, in more instances, probably stronger than they should have been so that they fit the challenge rating they were at. And that's because, like, if you're going to go back and run Curse of Strahd with the 2024 Player's Handbook and it lists a vampire and there are a werewolf, and you go to look at your monster manual, you got to look at your 2025 or 2024 monster manual and then say, okay, it's still challenge rating 4, so that adventure was still balanced, but now I know that this is a real challenge rating 4 as opposed to possibly an under or overpowered challenge rating 4. And then that way, if my party is designed to fight challenge rating 4 monsters, we should be good to do it. So I think the large focus on that backwards compatibility is you being able to utilize all of the adventures, but they are again saying that it should work with everything else. Like I've also said, I imagine in my opinion, the next player book should be any subclass that didn't make it from 2014, and then everything else gets amalgamated into one, and that's the next player source book. But I don't know. Let me know your thoughts, opinions in the comments down below. I'll see you all next time.